Welcome, everyone. I'm Nancy, and I'm happy to be here today to share my thoughts on one of my favorite subjects. As I often do when I talk about dog behavior, I'm going to encourage us all to take a moment here and step back from micromanaging our dogs and to take the time to really enjoy them. I love taking every opportunity that I get to talk about making an extra effort to learn who our dogs are and what their individual needs are, what they like, what makes them happy. They're individuals, and it's totally worth it to get to know them. So I'd like for our time together here to feel more like a discussion among friends and fellow dog lovers. And we're talking about how we can make walking with our dogs more enjoyable while using simple techniques and equipment that we're already familiar with, but it's just that the approaches that I'm going to talk about today aren't usually the first things that come to mind when we reach for solutions to on-leash walking issues. So what I'm about to offer as a solution is not what you'd expect from a dog training webinar or presentation. Most of us here today are trainers who work with clients. You'll be able to use what we're talking about today to help your clients have a joyful experience walking with their dogs. I'll be talking about games and techniques that they too can easily apply. Let's start by taking a look at what most people envision when we talk about walking on leash with a dog. This is the ideal, right? A dog who's walking by our side and the leash is short and it's loose and there's no tension on it. We can practically just let it dangle from our fingers. And the dog is walking by our side in perfect step. I mean, it's beautiful, isn't it? This is the ideal. This is the holy grail of loose-leash walking. When dog owners consult with trainers, either through a group training class or in a private in-home setting, what they want and what they expect is to be walking like this with their dog, usually after only a few lessons. This is perfection. Is it achievable? Yes, of course, through a variety of means. Does it represent harmony? Well, sometimes. And this is what I want to talk about today, this perfect image that we see illustrated in these photos. I want to take a closer look at how we arrived at deciding that this is the perfect image. I want to talk about reality, about well-being, enrichment, and quality of life for our dogs. First, let's consider the terminology that we use. We say that we walk our dogs. It sounds a little bit like a chore, that dogs need to be walked. What we often hear from clients is that their dog walks too quickly and he pulls, or too slowly because he stops every 5 feet to investigate something, and they find this annoying because their own walking pace is disrupted. Or they feel that the dog is walking too erratically, because he wants to zigzag and he isn't walking in a straight line. Well, if we change our perspective a little, we can actually reach a point where we view these behaviors as not only acceptable, but desirable, as something that we want to allow our dogs to do, because it's what they need to do. We tend to measure our dog's behavior according to our own standards, like how fast we like to walk, or where we want to go, or what things we find interesting during our walks. Let's look at this activity through a different lens. We know that most behaviors that we label as problematic are a result of unmet needs. We know that we can accomplish more in terms of affecting behavior if we first make sure that a dog's needs are met. So if we consider these activities like sniffing and exploring and investigating and moving at different paces, sometimes hurrying, sometimes standing still, and moving around in different directions instead of in a straight line. If we consider these activities as necessary to meet our dog's needs, it's easier to see how once these needs are met, then we'll be in a better position to teach our dogs that once in a while, when it's necessary or more convenient, we'll need for them to walk next to us at our pace and go in the direction that we need to go. So just to be clear, I'm not saying that we'll never require our dog to walk on a loose leash at our side and at our pace. Of course we will. And of course we can teach this. But this type of walking should be reserved for the destination walk. That's when you have a clear agenda. You need to get from point A to point B for whatever reason. It could be that you're walking from your car to a specific destination, or you're crossing a busy street, or you're walking past something or someone, and you need for your dog to stay close to you. But regardless of the reason for a destination walk, this type of walk is short, and the behavior that we're asking our dogs to offer is temporary. In my book, walking next to me in a straight line never lasts more than a few meters or for a very brief amount of time. The exercise walk is one where the purpose of the activity is to get a workout, like jogging or running. So by definition, it's not really a walk at all, at least not for us, because our walking pace is far slower than a dog's walking pace. Even for a small dog. When my little dog walks at his normal pace, I'm either walking rigorously or I'm practically jogging to keep up. But when I talk about an exercise walk, I'm referring to people who like to run or jog or skate with their dogs. And this is an activity that needs to be trained. The endurance required for this type of physical activity is just as high for the dog as it is for us. Dogs are not designed to run at a steady pace for a long time, or at least it's not a natural behavior. They need to be gradually conditioned for this activity. And because we don't want to stop every few steps to let the dog sniff, because we're out for a run, we need to teach them to stay with us. Now, if we're asking them to run in a straight line without stopping to sniff or pee or to investigate, then we need to make sure that this is not the dog's only outing for the day. This outing meets our needs, but not our dog's. He will still need to have his own walk where he can do dog things. And that brings us to the meandering walk. This is the type of walk that our dogs need every single day, if possible. Let the dog guide you. He'll follow his nose, and we'll follow him. That means we'll move at his pace as much as possible. And we'll talk more about this type of walk a little later, because this is the one that I want us to focus on. This is the foundation for all other types of walks. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about equipment because this information is easily available from a lot of different resources. But what I will talk about is the equipment that I like to use and why I like to use it. And I know that each of you is perfectly capable of making your own decisions regarding equipment and why one thing might work best for one dog under certain conditions. But here is my go-to equipment for my own dog. So my preferred equipment for the dog to wear is a comfortable harness, one that doesn't restrict movement in any way, one that's easy to put on and doesn't rub or chafe the dog's skin, so preferably a padded harness. Benny here is wearing a perfect fit harness. Benny is my first little dog. And prior to him, I always had large dogs and often very powerful pullers when I first adopted them. This type of harness would not have been appropriate for them in the early days when we were learning to walk together. So for them, I used the Freedom No Pull harness or the Balance harness because they allowed us to be out there together more safely. And of the harnesses available to help me handle pulling behavior, they are the most comfortable for dogs and the more better designed ones in terms of not restricting movement at the shoulder level. There may be other brands out there that I simply don't know about, but the bottom line is to find something that provides safety in the most comfortable way possible. Think of how it feels for you to be out walking in shoes that don't fit well, or clothes that are too tight, or that restrict your movements, or that rub against your skin. You want your dog to feel comfortable. As for the leash, I use a long line. For all walks, I use a long line. I do have a standard 6-foot leash that I keep handy for when I need to walk with my dog for a short distance with a very specific destination, or for when I know he'll be walking on a crowded street or somewhere where he'll need to stick close to me. But otherwise, I use a attain leash that is 15 feet long. I also have one that's 30 feet long for when we're out in a wide open space, like in a field or on a beach, and I can safely give my dog that kind of space. In the past, I've used 10-foot and 12-foot leashes and enjoyed them just as well. But with Benny, 15-foot works very well for us. And I like Biathane because it's strong and it's so easy to keep clean and dry. That thing gets dragged through water and snow and dirt and mud, and it always looks and feels brand new. For years, I used a long line made of soft leather, but once I discovered Biathane, there was just no turning back for me. I absolutely love it. So that's the equipment that I use. While we're on the topic of equipment, one of the more common questions that comes up is, why don't we just allow our dogs to run around freely without the restriction of a leash? Well, I have a short answer to that and a longer one. The short answer is this. In most places, it's the law. Wherever it's legal and safe for your dogs to be off-leash, then by all means, you can make the decision to enjoy that space off-leash. But the thing about leashes, and this is my long answer now, is that they do allow everyone to safely share a public space. And I wish that more people understood and appreciated this. The photo you see here was taken while I was vacationing in Northeast Florida before the pandemic with my husband and Benny. Benny's on a long line, you can see it there in the photo, and he was running around to his little heart's content. When we approached people or other dogs, I would very gently shorten the line out of consideration for the other people. Benny wasn't even aware that I was doing it. And as I shortened it, I was moving closer to him, meaning I wasn't dragging him back towards me. His stride and exploration was never interrupted. He had no idea that I was moving closer, except on the rare occasion where I would call him back to me. So I would basically be walking my hand down the leash and then gathering it in a loop in my other hand. I never need to apply pressure to the leash when I do this. And this is important because walking with a long leash requires practice and constant attention and adjustment. It's an acquired skill, and it's meant to maximize safety as well as your dog's sense of freedom. So anyway, a few months earlier, we had spent some time on another beach further north on the coast of Maine where some dogs were on leash and some were off leash. Most of the dogs who were off leash were fine and really well behaved, but many weren't, and they posed a danger to other dogs, especially to little guys like Benny. You know, little dogs running and hopping around can be dangerously exciting to some larger dogs. It was very stressful to be out there because we had to constantly scan the area and to be on the alert for off-leash dogs who were approaching us too quickly or too directly or with a far too intense a focus on Benny. That made me nervous, and I hated the experience. And Benny wasn't really enjoying himself either. I could tell by his behavior. He wasn't sniffing and exploring like he does when he's relaxed. He was on the lookout for other dogs. Now, on the beach that you see in this photo, there were leash laws, and every single dog that we saw was on a leash of some sort, either on a standard leash or a long line or even a few retractable leashes. No dogs were loose, none. And the people never once let their dogs invade another dog's space. It was amazing. I'd never experienced that before. And we saw the same thing every single day for a week. Everyone respecting the leash laws, and as a result, everyone got to enjoy the beach, including people without dogs who might not want to come into contact with dogs. This was a public space, and by definition, it's meant to be enjoyed by everyone. And I'm talking about this here because I believe with all my heart that dogs can absolutely enjoy themselves while on leash. They do need off-leash time, of course, but this should never be at the expense of the safety and well-being of others. Anyway, today we're here to talk about on-leash walks specifically, so I'll stick to that. I mentioned that I like to use a long line whenever possible, and I've always felt this was more beneficial for the dog than walking them on a short leash, and now there's some data that backs that up. A small study was done in France to measure the amount of time that dogs spent sniffing during a walk and how the sniffing activity affected their pulse rate. Granted, only 61 dogs took part in the study, but this is one of the first studies to directly measure this data, so it's a great start. The results show that dogs on a long leash spent a significantly higher amount of time sniffing compared to dogs on a short leash, and that this correlated with a decreased pulse rate. So in layman's terms, I'd say that translates to a more relaxing experience for the dog. He's getting more benefits out of the walk if he's on a long leash compared to being walked on a short leash. And from what I've gathered, the dogs being walked on a short leash were not necessarily prevented from sniffing. They just didn't engage in it as much as the dogs on the long leash. And looking at the numbers cited, dogs on a long leash spent 280% more time sniffing than those on a short leash. That's almost 3 times more. And dogs who were off leash completely spent 330% more time sniffing than those on a short leash. I think that the small difference between the long leash and the off leash dogs is remarkable, because although there's a clear increase in the sniffing time for the off leash dogs, it's actually not that far off of the figure for the dogs who are on a long leash. So I think that's worth noting, especially for those who are truly hell-bent on dogs being off leash, even in public spaces. Often they feel strongly about their dogs being off leash because they're convinced it's the only way to let their dogs enjoy a sniffy adventure. And now we have some data to counter this argument, and it should be reassuring. And if you want to read what the authors Christina and Aurélien Buzinski put together about this study, you can check it out at dogfieldstudy.com. Right. Now that I've sung the praises of using comfy harnesses and long leashes, it's time to address the more practical side of walking on leash. What do we do when we've got a powerful dog who drags us around by the leash? I mean, isn't that what our clients are calling us about? Well, yes, that is certainly something that needs to be addressed. And the truth is that in most cases, the strong pullers are rarely walked because they pull so much. And the less they're taken out to walk, the more they pull the next time they find themselves out there with an opportunity to sniff and explore. So the more they pull, the more we resist. And the more we resist, the more miserable everybody gets. And that just leads to people deciding it's no fun to walk the dog. So they don't do it. Or they resort to using equipment or techniques that might control the pulling by having the dog walk right next to them, but that don't lead to actual harmony, because by creating that perfect picture of a dog walking next to his human with his head held up, we know the dog's needs aren't being met. The human's needs are met, but it's a one-way street here, and this scenario is out of balance. So let's talk about some of the things that we can do to reach that balance where both we and our dogs are enjoying walks. Listed here are some of the basic ingredients that lead to a harmonious walk. First, get out there. It often feels counterintuitive to tell someone who's not walking with their dog because their dog's behavior makes it difficult that they should get out there more and walk with their dog more. The thing about the early stages of working on achieving harmonious walks is that for the dog, getting out there represents a novelty. Everything's interesting. Everything's exciting. So much fascinating stimuli competing for their attention. So yeah, they'll be moving very quickly and probably erratically and in all sorts of directions at first. It's like hitting your very first buffet, where you're told you can have everything that you see and as much of it as you like. Well, the first few times you probably eat too much and too quickly. And then with experience, when you no longer feel like it will all be taken away from you, or you don't know when you'll get a chance like this again, with time and repetition, you learn to pace yourself. And you don't feel that threat of scarcity anymore. You know you'll have access to it again soon, whenever you want. So you calm down. Well, the best way to deal with those early stages when the dog is super excited is to arrange to be in an environment where these behaviors and this level of excitement is easier to manage, like in a relatively quiet area away from people or traffic. And I appreciate that not everyone has easy access to like a wide open field or a beautiful trail in the woods. But even a quiet residential street, or if you live in a city, maybe a side street or an alley or a parking lot during off hours, that'll do. But you have to get out there. You have to get past that initial first-time buffet effect. The second ingredient is food. Bring treats, and lots of them. I never leave home to go walk with my dog without slipping at least a handful of treats into a pocket. And I use them every single time. They're part of the adventure, and you'll see why when I talk about the next points. Checking in. This is a very basic skill that is fun to teach dogs, easy to teach our clients, and it's easy to use, and it's extremely versatile. It really just means that our dog looks up or looks back to take a glance at us every now and then. And sometimes he comes closer to us, but he doesn't always need to. It's just a means for a person and their dog to stay connected, all while allowing the dog to spend most of the time exploring. More on this later. Chase the food. This is another super fun game to teach the dog, and again, very easy to teach our clients. It involves the very simple task of gently tossing or rolling a treat or a piece of kibble ahead of us as we walk, so that the dog can chase it, follow it with his eyes and his nose, and of course he gets to eat it. Also a very versatile behavior that comes in handy in a bunch of different situations. More on this later too. And finally, because I use a long line, I have both hands on the leash at all times. I carry nothing else, like a coffee or a phone or keys or a water bottle. My hands are 100% engaged in handling the leash. One hand holds the bulk of the leash in a loop, and the other holds the slack like a pulley. The slack of the leash runs loosely through that hand, and it's also the hand that I'll use when I need to hang on to the leash tightly. More on that later as well. So here's the big picture. These are all the elements that we need to incorporate in order to be able to finally enjoy walking with our dogs on leash. And I fully appreciate how elementary this all sounds, but I promise you that if you can focus on these very simple things rather than on trying to train a healing behavior, you and your clients are going to get so much more out of walking with the dog, and so will the dog. Now, let's take a closer look at a couple of these elements so that the whole picture will make more sense. I'm going to talk about the check-in behavior here as though you had never heard of it. And the reason that I want to do that is because often, the more advanced we become with our training skills, the more we forget about the basics. Or worse, we forget how to teach the basics to our clients. Or we become so accustomed to working with people or dogs who already have some training skills that we don't think to revisit square one and rebuild the behavior from the very start. But the basics are where it's at. Foundation skills are at the root of every solution that you'll ever need to resolve a behavior issue. So, here we go. I define checking in as this. Your dog momentarily connects with you through eye contact without being cued to do so. And this is something that's built over time and through repetition. I absolutely love it, and I feel that it creates a genuine connection with my dog whenever we're out and about together. So when I say go back to the basics and build a check-in behavior from the very start, I am not kidding. Go way back to square one and start reinforcing any and all spontaneous glances from your dog. And I suspect that many of you already have a dog who stares at you when you're in a training context because your dog has learned that that's probably a good idea and they're watching for a signal or a cue that will lead to access to a reinforcer. But what about when you're not in a training context? Does your dog still regularly check in with you? Part of the problem that many of us run into when we're trying to solve behavior issues is behavior issues that take place during day-to-day life is that training happens only during official training sessions. When the training session is over, our dog knows that there's no opportunity for reinforcement, and then the behavior falls apart. So we can change that by going back to the starting gate and reinforcing eye contact from the dog whenever and wherever it's offered. Be ready with some treats stashed a little bit everywhere all over your home for this purpose. And if food isn't readily available, maybe shower the dog with attention or play spontaneously with him or pet her or whatever the dog enjoys the very moment you catch your dog glancing at you. And the goal, of course, is to make it very clear to the dog that paying attention to you is very rewarding. Now remember you're playing this game inside your home. There's no need to solicit your dog's attention by calling his name or by attracting him with sounds or movements. That'll come later when other stimuli are added to the environment or when the environment itself has changed. For now, you just want to make a point of reinforcing as many spontaneous gifts of attention that you can capture. And I know I know how simple this sounds. And that's the glorious part about this exercise. It is simple, and it's the start of a beautiful rapport that will lead us to all those other behaviors that we're going to need when the dog is outside and on leash. Everything we do to teach loose leash walking actually stems from this very simple behavior. Everything. So it's truly worth our time to make sure that it's heavily rewarded. So to quickly recap, checking in is something that needs to be captured and reinforced as often as possible during regular daily life, and not just something that's reinforced only during training sessions. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing at the time, if you catch your dog turning towards you or just casting a glance your way, capture that. Capture that moment and reward it. Again, these next steps will seem very basic to many of you, but they play such a crucial role in what will eventually be the on-leash behavior that we're looking for. And it's surprising to me how many people rush through this process, even when they know and understand the importance of building behaviors systematically. Don't underestimate its importance in the process. So after spending some time rewarding glances indoors, you should start adding some more elements to the exercise in order to begin creating different conditions that will look more and more like the walking on leash context. The next step is to put your dog's harness on him and attach the leash. Now that alone is often enough to get the dog really excited, right? And they might start pulling towards the door because they anticipate a walk. This right there, this very moment, is often when the dog goes from first gear to fourth gear, and then he stays in fourth gear during the entire walk. So instead, I suggest you stand still, remain calm, and just wait for a moment. Watch the dog carefully and mark the slightest glance in your direction, and then reward it. And deliver the treat close to your own body rather than reaching towards the dog. And this will reinforce the behavior of returning to you, which will come in handy later when we're playing this game outside. So remember now, you're standing inside your home, and all you've done is you've put on the harness and attached the leash. Keep marking and treating for every glance until the dog is focused solidly on you. And for most dogs, that won't take long at all. And when that happens, take the exercise outside in an area with low distractions. So if possible, an area that is not as exciting as the street or a park. It might be a backyard or a porch or a balcony if you live in an apartment or a condo, or a back deck if you have one. Let your dog take in the sounds and smells around him. Let him look around and sniff the air. And again, just like you did indoors, stand still and just watch him. Mark and treat every glance he throws your way, and then let him return to taking in his surroundings. I'm going to play a couple of videos for you to show you what this might look like. The first video was shot in my backyard. Let's take a look at that now.
Yes. 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 I got that. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yes. 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 I know that was my hand moving. Yes. Yes.
The goal here is to be able to step out the door with the dog on leash and to have him look to us in anticipation of a treat rather than bolting for the
Yes.
street or towards the car. He learns to automatically pause and
Yes.
check in with us after he crosses that threshold. It's also a super handy behavior to have when you need a free hand to lock the door behind you as you leave.
Yes.
So, with a bit of practice, you have a dog who steps outside and then immediately turns toward you to wait.
Yes.
This exercise can also be used for when you're getting out of the
Yes.
car with your dog. If he's anticipating going somewhere exciting, he'll likely
Yes.
bolt out of the car in fourth gear. Well, you can play this game by getting in and out of the car while it's still parked in your driveway,
Yes.
making it easier for your dog to offer you a check-in right after getting out of the car in a location that is not exciting. Remember earlier when I talked about how some dogs will get very excited the moment that the harness and leash are introduced and they're propelled into fourth gear and they stay that way throughout the entire walk? Well,
Go back
after these exercises, we now have a dog who's still in first gear even once he's outside the door. And for dogs who are usually strong pullers during walks,
Yes.
this is really, really helpful. When we can get to this stage in our training,
Yes.
we already begin to feel more optimistic about getting out there with our dogs. And it's beginning to feel more pleasant, and progress happens quickly enough with these check-in sessions. So we get to experience some positive reinforcement too.
Yes. Yes.
So to recap, revisit those foundation skills from the very beginning. Start practicing the check-in behaviors inside your home while your dog is off leash. Then inside your home while he's wearing his harness and leash. Then in a low distraction area just outside your home. And then practice stepping outside the door and out of the car while it's still parked in your driveway if this is something that your dog struggles with. And now, this is the last part of the check-in training process. Once the dog has successfully gotten into the habit of checking in with you in low distraction scenarios, it's time to increase the level of difficulty a notch or two by taking the behavior on the road. Now, ideally, you'll want to take your dog to a relatively quiet spot to walk. I like to drive to some walking paths that are a few minutes from my home that offer a quiet space for me and my dog to connect more easily. And you'll see the space in the video that I'll play for you in just a minute. Now, obviously, not everyone has access to quiet walking paths. So if that isn't an option for you, work with what you've got. Just keep in mind that practicing in an area with lots of stimuli competing for your dog's attention might just require extra patience on your part. So anyway, your dog will be on leash for this exercise, and although the leash in the photos that you see here is held rather loosely and in a more traditional way, I always put my hand through the handle so that it rests on the back of my wrist, and then I grasp the leash with my hand. And even when you practice the check-in exercises while you're out and about, make sure to give your dog ample opportunities to sniff and explore. Because the point of these foundation exercises isn't to frustrate our dogs or to make walking boring by insisting that they pay attention to us and not to their environment. On the contrary, we want them to stay connected with us, yes, but we also want to make sure that we meet their needs. A dog whose needs are met is a calmer, happier dog. And that's the whole premise of getting out there more often and allowing the dog to do dog stuff while we walk. Because in the end, it will make walking far more pleasant for both the dog and us. So what you'll see in the video I'm about to play is my husband walking with Benny. Normally, while doing this training, I would have been holding the leash, but in order to get video of the session, I had to enlist my husband to hold the leash because he's terrible with a camera. I had deliberately chosen a location and a time of day when it would be unlikely that we run into other people or dogs. And that's just so that it would be more likely for Benny to succeed at offering me some check-ins. You'll see me getting Benny's attention by making kissy noises or whistling or by saying his name. As soon as he looks at me, I mark it and I deliver a treat near my body. So he needs to return to me to get the treat. In the beginning, I get his attention often, like maybe every 6 to 10 steps. I want as many opportunities as possible to reinforce that check-in behavior. And once I deliver the treat, I let him know that he can return to walking and sniffing. Then, after a few repetitions of this, you'll notice that I'm no longer making sounds to get his attention. I stay quiet, and we keep walking. And eventually, he glances back towards me, and I capture that moment, and I reward it. And it doesn't take long for him to start checking in with me on his own volition every now and then. Throughout the entire session, though, Benny is allowed to sniff and explore as he wishes. This is what a walk with the dog should look like. This is what a dog needs to do. I can't imagine walking down a path like this and expecting my dog to walk next to me with his head up, looking straight ahead. Anyway, let's watch the video. Good boy. Here you go. Let's go. Benny. Good boy. Good. Let's go. Good boy. Good. Nice check-in. Let's go. Yes. Good. Ready? Let's go. It's very nice. Good. Let's go. Good boy. Very good. Ready? Let's go. Yes. Good job. Let's go. Yes. Nice check-in. Let's go. Yes. Beautiful. Good boy. Let's go. Okay. Back to this solution checklist. I have talked so much about the check-in behavior that I thought it might be useful to revisit this. The next game that I find extremely useful to help create a harmonious walk is the chase the food game. And I mentioned earlier that this game involves gently tossing or rolling a treat or a piece of kibble ahead of us as we walk so that the dog can chase it and eat it. And this game comes in very handy as both a management tool as well as just a game to play with our dogs to maintain a connection and just to have some fun together while we're walking. I've used this game a lot with dogs who are powerful pullers. And by tossing the treat just a few feet ahead of me, it provides the dog with a fun activity to do while remaining relatively close to me and moving at a speed that I can comfortably keep up with. And what it also does is it gets the dog so focused on the space immediately in front of him, waiting for the next treat to land and roll, that he just naturally slows down, usually so that he doesn't miss seeing it. So after I toss or make the treat roll ahead of me, I just keep walking forward. The dog is on a long line, so he might chase the treat for 6 to 10 feet in front of me, then he'll stop to eat it. And during that time, I'm catching up to him, and when I get close, I'll toss another treat. If I'm lucky, that treat will bounce around or it'll roll erratically. That does a great job of tiring out the dog after just 10 or 15 treats. I have never met a dog who did not enjoy this game. And as a bonus, it's a fun thing to do if you need to distract the dog for a few moments, like if you see something up ahead that you know will excite him, like another dog or a cat crossing the street. So it's a pretty cool management game as well. Playing chase the food is also my go-to activity for those dogs who start to play tug with the leash. Right near the end of the walk, when they recognize that they're on their way back home. Do you know what I'm talking about? Sometimes I'd get complaints from clients that as they would turn the corner and start heading home, their dog would either sit or lie down and refuse to move, or they'd start grabbing the leash with their mouth and playing tug in the middle of the street. Most of the time, it was easy enough to figure out that the dog was aware that the walk was about to end soon, and this was their way of protesting that. The ideal solution, of course, is a longer walk. Clearly, the dog's needs haven't been met yet. But sometimes that's just not possible, and you really do need to get home. So in those moments, the chase the food game can be played while you keep walking towards home. I've always played this game with all of my dogs, often for no reason other than it's just so much fun for them, and it's fun for me too. It gives us an opportunity to connect when we're out there, and I enjoy seeing them having fun, of course. So here's the end result. I've taken my own dogs as well as clients' dogs to this particular soccer and baseball field because walking the perimeter offers so many sniffing opportunities. It's actually not that hard to find open spaces if you really look for them. And again, it can be an urban parking lot. It doesn't have to be green grass and trees. In this video, you'll notice a couple of times that Benny reaches the end of the line and it goes taut for just a brief moment. And as soon as he feels that tension, he lets us catch up. This has happened with every single dog that I've ever worked with, even the strongest of pullers. After lots of repeated opportunities to get out there and sniff, when they get to do this on a regular basis, the pulling stops. They no longer feel rushed and overexcited. And when I'm walking with a dog on a long line, I'll let him choose where he wants to go, what scent he wants to track, what spot he wants to check out, and I'll follow behind him at his speed. And I'll stand and I'll wait for however long it takes for him to inspect something. If I see an opportunity for the dog to hop over something or to crawl under something or otherwise use his body to negotiate an obstacle, I'll encourage that. Being on leash doesn't mean that the dog gets no exercise. A long line makes all kinds of physical exercise possible. And then in this video, you'll see us walking on a beach during a vacation. We were in a new location that Benny didn't know, and all I did on that very first walk on the beach was to practice doing some check-ins with him. Not only does this help him generalize the behavior under new conditions, it also allows me to gauge how he's feeling in this new environment. If I hadn't been able to capture his attention, or if he had refused the food, that would have provided me with some important information. So here's a short clip of a few warm-up check-ins while on the beach.
Benny! Okay, go. Benny! Good boy. Okay, go.
This photo needs no explanation, really. You've probably already seen it many times on social media. It goes without saying that walks with our dogs is not a time to be checking emails or Facebook on our phones. It's just as beneficial to us to be in the moment with our dogs. It's actually quite relaxing to watch them take in their surroundings, especially when they stop to very carefully sniff and fully inspect a single spot or a leaf or a blade of grass. Dogs get us out there, right? They give us a reason to leave our desks or to get up off the couch or just to stop talking or working or worrying. A harmonious walk is more than just getting our dogs to walk on a loose leash. It's so much more than that. It's about providing our dogs with something they need and something that they deserve. It's about taking advantage of that moment to connect with our dog in meaningful ways. And once we pair these two elements together, that's when we actually discover that the dog is no longer pulling on the leash. I often tell clients that this is how it'll happen. The more they get out there, and if they're conscious about making sure that their dog's needs are being met, one day they'll just sort of notice, oh, hey, he's not pulling anymore. When did that happen? So the bottom line is this. The path to harmonious walks is less restraint, not more. The more you get your clients out there walking with their dogs, the faster that they'll be able to eliminate that novel buffet effect, and the more satisfying the walk will be for their dogs. And always keep in mind that these less restrictive, more dog-centered walks will result in overall improvement and better behavior at home. And by better behavior, I mean healthy behaviors that indicate a dog is feeling good and that his needs are met, which in turn usually translates into behaviors that we humans like. And most importantly, they'll begin to get to know their dogs and to connect with them in ways that are somehow different and deeper than in a regular training context. And only once these very basic skills have been taught, and only on the condition that the dog's exploration needs have been met, should we move forward with teaching a relaxed, healing position where the dog is cued to walk next to us temporarily. That part should only come once the dog's needs have been met. And anyway, it's way easier to teach a healing behavior if his exploration needs have been met. So that you're not struggling to rein in a dog who's just raring to go. You'll have a dog who's in a much better state of mind to learn and to be willing to hang out next to you for a little bit. And that's my take on loose leash walking. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions or comments, or if you think of something later, you can always reach me by email on Facebook or on Instagram or through my website at nancytucker.com.